Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, November 20th, 2018. This is the regular monthly meeting of the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee and the Citizens Oversight Committee, acting as Citizens Finance Advisory. It's 3:30 p.m. We're in Vets Hall. We have a quorum of 5 of our 7 members present, with Walter Heath and John Irwin absent. And so we have a quorum. We'll call the meeting to order, and we'll rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we will start with committee members' announcements and presentations. First off, I'd like to congratulate Dawn Addis on her city council election, and this will be her last meeting with our CFAC committee. So, Dawn, would you like to say anything or any other announcements?
Sure. I'd like to thank the committee for your support and for the work you've done and we've done over the past year and a half or so, and thank the finance director and the finance department for all of the hard work and improvement that you've done on the time that I've been on CFAC. It's been tremendous to see the improvements that have happened in our city under your leadership, so thank you.
Agree, and thank you for your support, Dawn. Dave, anything?
I'd just like to congratulate Councilmember-elect Dawn Addis on her election victory. Looking forward to her being on the council.
Thank you, Dave. John?
I just want to acknowledge Jennifer Callaway and all the work that you've been doing. I saw this report that you provided to the council for the most recent meeting. I guess it was actually a special meeting about yet another reserve fund policy, and you've done a ton of them. And you've got a lot of work coming up here in the next, looks like 5 months. And I just think this is so tremendous that you have taken this on and you're accomplishing it in a timely manner. This is a tremendous amount of work, and it's way overdue. And you were the person to put this together, and you're doing a great job of it. And I just tell you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, John. I'm sure we'd all concur with that. And, Bart, nothing. Okay, so that will conclude committee members' announcements and presentations. Public comment period, seeing none, I'll close public comment. And that will bring us to agenda item B1, which will be a brief finance update from our finance director, because item B2 will be our first quarter fiscal year review. Go ahead, Jen, thank you.
Thank you, and welcome. Thank you, everybody. Couple of things to update you on. So the department is working really hard on the CAFR and the year-end audit submittal. We want to try to meet that December 31st deadline without asking for an extension, because then it pushes into budget and mid-year. So we're pushing hard on that. That's why this agenda is a little bit shorter than maybe you had anticipated. Kind of went through and prioritized, and you will see year-end Measure Q report in December along with the CAFR submittal. It made sense to link those two together as year-end reports, which we had intended to provide year-end at this meeting, and we didn't make it. Also wanted to announce that we have 2 council meetings coming up in November. They've scheduled a council meeting for November 27th and November 29th. And the November 29th meeting, I believe you'll see the first quarter budget report with any feedback that we hear tonight provided in that staff report, as well as the organizational reclassifications and realignments that are kind of discussed in brief in what you have today. And the fiscal emergency plan draft will be presented on the 29th as well. So anybody that's interested in seeing those, wanted to announce that we'll have 2 vacancies, as the chair mentioned, on the CFAC committee, with committee member Addis joining the council in December, and then committee member Irwin is actually going to be, his term is up once he's back from his leave. So we'll be advertising for those 2 vacancies soon to help fill those if anybody's interested. And then lastly, I forgot to mention that the end of September, we did submit our budget for CSMFO recognition for outstanding budgeting or performance in budgeting. We haven't heard back from the CSMFO yet. I expect that will be in December at some point because the meeting this year is in January. So if we do hear back, I'll certainly share. I'm not sure we met all the criteria, but was interested in getting the feedback. So as we go into the 1920 budget cycle, we can add what we need to for that. So we'll sure get some notes back from them, and I'll share those with the committee when they come back. And also, we were lucky enough to get a scholarship for CSMFO this year. So Valerie and I are both going, and we're paying for us to go. And then Sandy Martin received a scholarship as a first-time attendee. So she will be able to go free of charge to the city. They covered registration, hotel, transportation, and everything. So that'll be a good learning experience for her and a way to get connected. So we're excited about that, and we'll keep trying in the future years to get more scholarships and send more staff, because it is a great, Val's first time was last year, and it was a great learning, I think, experience for her and just connecting with members in the finance community. So, and then lastly, we still have the budget brochure outstanding. That's not on this agenda as well because we just couldn't get to it with everything else. So we'll try to get that on the next agenda or as soon as possible with those last edits on the transfers in and out and trying to make the sense of those so that it's not confusing for anybody.
Thank you. Congratulations on that training scholarship. I think that's wonderful. And you're right. We did discuss last time about the budget-friendly brief. We're 95% there, but we do have to. I know I had asked that you look at maybe how we can do these transfers without making it too convoluted and make it simple for the public to understand. So we'll get something out.
Just to be clear, I'm okay for basically having this be next year, because it's a major issue when basically 56 million is shown as revenue, but 11 million of that, so what, 20% of it is double counting, added twice, however you want to phrase it. But to change the accounting system to put, bring that into order, will not be easy. But as long as we understand that, quite frankly, our revenues are about 44 million, and the expenditures next year will be, 50 or something, or 50, 53, whatever it is, something like that, and we're paying for that with funds that have been accumulated primarily in the WRF account. So that's fundamentally the story. Changing the numbers can be problematic this year, and I'm fine with not going in and changing the numbers as long as it's clear that there aren't statements that say that, okay, we're taking in more money than we're spending. No, we're really not. We're using other funds there.
No, I agree. I think it's important to get it right. And when we did it a couple of years ago with our subcommittee, we just had the general fund, and then we could do a couple of the enterprise funds individually. Where we were struggling was with the whole total, and maybe we will get something out early in the year that won't have the whole total. That lends itself to all that confusion.
And that's fine. Homer's the one that pointed this out to me, and at that point, it looked like it was maybe 2-3 million. Not 11 million that was here. So that to me is a big difference of a couple million versus 11 million of monies that we're including twice. If I've got the numbers right, and I think I did. And the reason I could do that is because of how well you put the budget together. That's why I could do that.
Fair enough. Okay, good. Go ahead, John, please.
In regards to that citizen-friendly budget, it's important, though, to recognize that it's still a balanced budget, even though it shows that expenditures are higher than revenues. When you have reserves that have been accumulated for the purpose of a project, and now it's time to actually build the project, it's still a balanced budget. So if you do present it in that manner, then you have to explain how it's a balanced budget, and that may take some extra space.
Good point. think we're all there. Okay, any other comments? All right, well, we will get there. That's our goal, so. Okay, so that brings us to item B2, the fiscal year first quarter budget performance and status update.
Thank you. So you have before you a draft of the first quarter budget performance report. We are still working on getting some of the detail gathered for a staff report for council. So your cover memo is a little bit short, and apologies for that. This was the first attempt at bringing it to the committee before it goes to council per the previous council direction. So our timing was a little off on what we could get done in the time period. But I think you do have the majority of everything. We'll, of course, share feedback with council that we hear from the committee. Before I go into some of the detail, I wanted to mention there's a few adjustments that we will be adding, 3 of which are kind of cleanups that council has already approved and we just didn't have on our list. That would be Amgen. The city council agreed to support Amgen. That'll come from the tourism TBID fund, accumulation fund of not to exceed $65,000. So we'll be adding that expenditure adjustment into the first quarter. The second one is $12,000 for the Community Choice Energy, and that's the new program with Monterey County that the council approved a few weeks ago. And then the last one will be a adjustment from the Harbor Fund, and that was for a grant to purchase jet skis. The Harbor Fund received a grant of $25,000 for jet ski purchase. The council approved that. The estimated cost came in at about $26,000. So we'll do adjustments to recognize receipt of the grant money, expenditure of the grant money, and then a transfer in of the additional $1,000 to cover the difference from their accumulation fund. So you'll see that. And then we'll have a couple smaller adjustments for rental income. Our tenant moved out of the Dunes property, which is on the corner of Dunes and Shasta. So she moved out in October. So we'll adjust down rental income based on that. And then we are receiving a minimal amount of income for the 741 Market property on the Embarcadero. We had budgeted 0 for that because we didn't have a tenant at the time of the budget process. So we'll do a small adjustment for that. And then about a $7,500 adjustment out of the Facilities Management Fund for some mold remediation over at the community center. That's been an ongoing project that they're working on, and we didn't have it budgeted for this year, but obviously needed to get that under control. So I just wanted to mention that you will see those added to the report when you look at the staff report for council. Other than that, the first quarter is trending well. Revenues are trending well, the exception being, and what we're watching, is sales tax. So we did just meet with our sales tax consultant last week. This is going to be a difficult one because there's a couple layering factors here. There's a change in system for how sales tax is reported, and that has thrown off sales tax for the last 2 quarters. So if you look at the county, it's about 10 or 13% lower than previous years in the same quarter. Our sales tax consultants have gone through and adjusted for what they think was not reported, and they're estimating that we're behind as a city about 1.9%, so about 2% less. But those are again adjusted. So we're hoping it'll catch up in the next quarter and we'll get some real numbers and know what we're looking at. If in fact we are down, it could be a sign that the economy is definitely slowing down and might need to have some caution going forward. So we'll keep a really close eye on that and monitor that closely. On the flip side of that, TOT is doing very well for the city so far. So we're trending about where we normally would be in the first quarter, which is great. We're up a little bit in some of the hotel categories and that kind of thing. So we continue to monitor that closely. Property tax is doing the same, trending as it would be expected in the first quarter. As you know, we don't get a lot of property tax until the second quarter, so it's a little bit hard to judge as well. Other than that, our permits, our charges for services is trending very high. There was a question on that came in, and we provided some information. There is a new IT fee that was added in this budget cycle to help cover the cost of CitySource, CityWorks, our GIS services, and that's added about $34,000 to this category for revenue in the first quarter. And then secondly is the cannabis application permits. So there's about $90,000 in there for the cannabis permits. Those costs are directly offset by the cost to review the applications. So we've hired HDL who is kind of industry leaders in reviewing these in the municipal world, help us review the applications, make sure all the criteria is met. There's legal costs incurred for that. So those are not, that's not money that'll just go into the general fund as a windfall or anything. There'll be offsetting costs that will support those reviews. But that's why that category is trending quite high when you look at previous years. Our business tax category is doing well. We've noticed with the implementation of our PO system that we're able to prevent businesses from doing business in the city or with the city that don't and not getting a business license, since that's part of the approval process. So do expect to see maybe a slight increase. Our business license taxes are not that much, but we do think we'll see a slight increase because of that. We're getting quite a few of them that on a typical basis would have went through, and nobody was really checking to make sure that that business license tax had been paid. So that's been a good preventative measure for us with the PO system. Overall, as well, our building permits in general are up. Part of that is the timing of when permit fees come in and when applications are pulled. It's always a little bit of a guessing game from year end into the next fiscal year of the timing of that. So some of what we projected for year end 17-18 actually came in this year 18-19, so that's slightly up than what we had expected, and that affects the fire department as well with the fire marshal's review of plan checks. Salary and benefits trending well. If you look at the report, we show 30% expended for the first quarter. That is all due to the prepayment of our PERS liability, our UAL. We made a $1.2 million payment up front. That was across all funds. And that saved us about $50,000 citywide, but $30,000 for the general fund. So that line item itself is 100% expended, which raises up the whole salary and benefits line item. We did account for that separately as an individual line item, so we could easily see and make sure that the rest of salary and benefits were trending as they should be. And we were right about that 25%, 24% level, which is what we would expect. So that we were pleased to see that. There was a question that came in about overtime for the fire department. A couple of situations with the fire department. They did have more mutual aid than was expected in the first quarter. There's offsetting revenue that comes in with that, and we'll true that up in the mid-year meeting as we're having a lot of mutual aid right now as well. That incurs overtime, but we are reimbursed for that. And then secondly, there was some personnel matters in the fire department that left shift shortages, and those, to the extent that they couldn't be covered by reserves, utilize overtime. So not worried at this point. It was trending similar to how it was last year. We'll keep an eye on that as we move into mid-year and true anything up in mid-year. General fund supplies and materials are trending well too at about 15%. When we look at our tourism department, the TBID is doing well. There's a little bit of accrual factor there with the percentages that we show, but we're in line with first quarter at about 23 to 26%. So you'll see the Amgen adjustment in the next draft of this, or the final draft of this. Other than that, we're not going to have any changes at this point, and we'll just continue to monitor going forward. And then Measure Q is doing well. Because of the sales tax reporting issue, it's a little bit early for me to say if our revenues are going to come in as we expected. It affected Measure Q as it did the general fund. But we're at about 10% right now, which is typically where we're at the first quarter. Mm-hmm. And then our expenditures are 17%. You do not have a report on the pavement management piece of this because that work had not started. They've started it last week or this week, and then we're going to have a little bit of a closure here with the Thanksgiving break, and it'll resume next week. So during the mid-year quarter, you'll see a report back on the pavement management plan and the monies expended towards that. And then on the last pages of the staff report are all of the proposed adjustments. and then the reasoning for them or what they are for. There was a question that came up about the cloisters and North Point. Both of those are assessment districts. They're relying upon the city engineer's report. That report came out, I believe it was June-ish, but it was right after we had adopted the budget or put together the proposed budget for adoption. So those are cleanup items, if you will, that reflect what was indicated in the engineer's report, with the exception of the $55,000 item for cloisters. And that was based on feedback from the cloisters community on some landscape architectural work that they wanted, as well as some shade structures. So Public Works has been meeting with the cloisters. We've incorporated our estimates for those into the budget adjustment, and that'll be from their accumulation fund. So it's a non-general fund expenditure that won't impact the city's operating funds. Similarly with North Point, it's a smaller assessment district, but we did need to true up the budget to staffing and supplies and materials. And then the larger $34,000-ish for the wastewater treatment plant. This was, if you remember, when we did the budget development, we worked very hard to get staff allocated to the programs and funds that they were working within. A little bit of a, guessing at some point. So when we went through for first quarter and we're looking at the wastewater treatment plant, and we started talking to staff, realized that the admin allocation that we had in there was overestimated. So we are truing that up and removing that amount and putting it back to the general fund Public Works Department to be consistent with how staff is spending their time. The other, as long as we're discussing staffing, the other major adjustment in here is about $45,000, and we're refining that number. I expect it's going to come down for into city reorganizations or reclassifications. We mentioned during the budget development process that we had some part-time people working essentially full-time status but not receiving benefits. So we worked to identify those positions and either make them full-time or reduce their hours so that it was fair to them as employees. The other part of that was we asked the department directors to identify positions that they felt were working out of class, meaning they were doing jobs beyond what their job description said for some extended period of time. We received several kind of offline, indicators that people were doing so, but really wanted to look at it as a whole comprehensively, because then we could make a decision of this is what we could afford as a city, this is what we can't afford, and we need to take these duties away and either figure out another way to provide them or allocate them somewhere else or, make a change. So we've gone through that process this first quarter, received a handful of requests and identified several of them that are in fact working out of the class. The best example would be our city clerk. She does city clerk risk management and oversees HR. The HR and risk management duties are not included in the job description. There was no adjustment to the salary band when she took those over. So we either need to strictly keep her as a city clerk or recognize that those duties are something that she's doing and include that in the job descriptions and the salary band. We did a comparison of other agencies of similar size, similar duties, looked at their job descriptions, their salary bands, essentially did a salary survey of our own internal to support any recommendations that we have. So with this will come new job descriptions, new salary band recommendations, and then the budget adjustments to support what we're recommending for those positions. There will also be a component related to the utilities departments, and that would be for water, sewer, and the treatment plant. Those employees are members of SEAU, and they have voted and aligned all of their job descriptions into three descriptions, which will allow for cross-training. You can move employees from, water, sewer, wastewater treatment as needed. They'll be certified in all of the areas as needed, but from an employee's perspective, allows for more career advancement, more career growth. As they build certifications, salaries go up accordingly. And that is actually a cost savings to the utilities departments, or it's eliminating 2 positions that are not currently filled. but raising the bands for those employees that are in those departments as they achieve those additional certifications. So that'll be part of this as well. There won't be a budget adjustment. We'll just realize the cost savings in the utilities fund at year end at this point. So if you have any questions, happy to answer those, but that's kind of the general overview of the first quarter.
Thank you. Excellent job. And I think since there were so many good questions submitted, maybe we'll go through a couple of these with just some comments or just to make sure everybody understands the response. But in general, I really like the description and the narrative and then the questions that were answered at the last minute. So I have one technical question for you, Jennifer. On the business tax license issue, how are telecommuters that work for companies that receive a W-2, they're not independent consultants or contractors, do they fall under that? I know of several situations over the years, and I don't think the guidance was always clear, and I think in preparation for probably seeing more of that is, you want to attract people to the area, and there's a lot more people in certain industries working remotely. And are they required if they're working out of their house or renting some spot in town?
So our Muni Code is written to require anybody doing business within the city to have a business license tax. They don't have to be present in the city to meet that requirement. There just has to be a nexus to the city. So, not an example would be OpenGov. They never came to the city. We worked with them remotely, yet they were required to obtain a business license tax. That was not consistently applied in the past. That's kind of as we were reading through the Muni Code and
I'm sorry, I missed some of that. Can you clarify?
As we were looking through the Muni Code and trying to train our staff, because as you know, we have new staff, this came up as a conversation item. We conferred with our city attorney that was his interpretation as well. In the past, companies working outside of the city limits were not required to get a business license, but now we're interpreting it as any nexus with the city. So any company, whether it's telecommuting or if they're doing something that involves work in the city, not necessarily just with the city, but in the city limits, we are requiring them to get a business license.
So if they live in the city and they're just, working remotely in their spare office, their company or that person should obtain a business?
Yeah, if they're in the city, working in the city, unless somehow we find out about it, it would be a little bit more challenging for us to catch it, depending on tax reporting or something like that. If they're doing business with the city, we certainly would catch it through invoicing.
Yeah, okay. Let's see, who wants to start? Bart, do you have any questions on any of this?
I'm probably just really slow on this salary benefit issue. I was trying to understand, it looks like the reading here is due to $870,000 upfront payment, which sounded like an $870,000 payment. You made mention to $1 million of something. And so I didn't understand how, if we made this $870,000 payment, and then your response, because it's pretty specific, I think, here in the words that say there was an upfront payment of $870,000. Your response back said, no, that's really not. It's sort of an overtime payment, so it's only part of that was in there. But then in your words, anyway, can you start over again to help me understand how much of that $870,000 is in this fiscal year and in the first quarter, and how we're adding some part of that, but we basically keep the budget about the same. I know that some of it is due to last year we had some of the same issue with a different kind of PERS. But
Yeah, so let's start over. I think that's a good idea. PERS has two components to it. So we pay what they call a normal cost, and that is that's to keep up with the promises we're making today. There's the unfunded accrued liability, which is that big wave of liability that came across when the market dropped and they lost money in their, the housing market and their investments, and everybody was assigned these UALs to make up for that UAL, unfunded accrued liability. The PERS gives each city an option. There's an annual UAL payment that's made. They give the cities an option to make that payment in July, and you save interest for the year on that, which is 7.5% or 7 point, as it's going down, as their rate is going down, it aligns with that. So we pulled out that UAL piece of the PERS payment and made that payment in July. On a citywide basis, so the utilities funds, the general fund, any fund having employees in it, the total payment was $1.2 million. The general fund impact to that was the $867,000 that's referenced in the report, because this is looking just at general fund. So paying $1.2 million saved us citywide about $50,000, saved the general fund about $35,000 in interest payments. But when you make that one-time big payment up front rather than on a monthly basis like you would a mortgage payment, it's going to skew your total salary and benefits and show that you're higher than you would expect to be in the first quarter because you made one big payment in July. So that's why we show 30% expended through September 30th, because we made that big payment first of the year. Our total budgeted salaries and benefits for 18-19 was less than the previous year. And that was due to some of the explanations that I was trying to give you in my response. We defunded the deputy city manager position, for example. We eliminated some part-time hours, made some of those employees full-time, but at the same time reassigned staff to the cloisters based on a request from them for additional staffing support, maintenance support. And then we paid 17-18 was the scheduled last payment for our police safety side fund. So naturally, when you pay those off, there's a short-term decline in the rate as it builds back up with the interest rate reductions or the discount rate reductions. So there's a bunch of different factors that lead to there. And I think I got confused with your 870 that you're referring to, that one payment. So that's why I commingled those responses. So I'm sorry for that. But does that help?
Okay, let me just play back, because it sounds like a good story may be here. One, that by paying this early, we saved $35,000, $50,000 of interest payments. And also, the reason this didn't change overall is there was close to $1 million worth of savings overall in salaries and benefits. That's why the number from 17-18 to 18-19, basically the budget stays the same, but it includes $870,000 payment for this PERS payoff.
So the salary savings from 17-18 to what we have budgeted for 18-19, if you look on page 14 of the whole packet or page 11 of the report, is about $200,000, about $180,000. And that's due to the defunding of the DCM position and that prepayment or that final payment of the PERS safety police plan. The $869 prepayment that we made for the general fund, we made those payments in prior years. They're part of the budgeted numbers. We just did them over on a monthly basis, like we were paying our mortgage. So we didn't achieve any savings from
Oh, I got it now.
Yeah.
Okay. They were monthly instead of upfront.
Right.
Oh,
So
okay.
we always had to
That-
pay them. It's just this year we chose to use some of our cash on hand, make the payment up front because we weren't earning that much in interest.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's the part I didn't
Okay.
understand. The other question, which was sort of an add-on, had to do with reporting on the 218 funds, and the answer you gave was, I guess there was a commitment to do that annually, and that's going to be in the spring. My problem, potentially, is I would hope that we're not saying we're going to wait till the spring, let's see what we spent, and then we'll create a budget to match what we spent. Rather than, do we have a plan now that we won't report on it other than annually, and that's fine with me, but is there a plan as to how the revenues will come in and what we're going to spend it on relative to the aspects of the wharf and the sewer and water upgrades? And then sort of a tag on to that was, I still don't really get why there was $14 million approved in the 218 before, which had $2 million for a water tank. Now that's down to $11 million with $3.5 million for that same water tank. The numbers just, that's why I think I'd like to see what the budget is going to be for this year, even if there's an agreement that we're not going to actually report on it until till spring of next year.
So I left a copy of the resolution that approved the wharf rate analysis for you on your desks up there, and there's copies in the back. But since this isn't agendized, I don't want to get into too much detail because it's a little off from first quarter. The intent of doing it in the spring, though, I will say, is we want to come back in the spring while we're doing budget development so that when we start collecting the surcharge in 19, we'll have a budget developed around what that surcharge is and what those projects will be and the wharf expenditures. So we should be a year ahead rather than a year behind, if that makes sense.
No, because we haven't started yet, and we had a 2015-218 vote. So
This-
monies have been collected somewhere after the 2015 vote, and there was a commitment at that time to have $14 million worth of expenditures for water and sewer repairs. So we're into this, and we're not ahead. We're behind 3 years at this point. Not you, but your predecessors.
So, and that's a good point. And there is a section in the draft report that says, well, this was the recommendation for the first year, and we would revisit it on an annual basis if we need to report back more often or change the policy. The policy was specific to the 2018 prop vote. So that was why we were thinking we were going to be ahead of the budget cycle.
Okay, well, that can be an agenda item for another meeting then, because I totally disagree with that. We're 3 years behind on tracking the money that we started collecting in 2015. And basically, this is an add-on to that. That's why this incremental amount of $41 is there. But there needs to be some accountability for the other vote, starting, I think, sooner than later. I don't understand. Many of the same council people were there for the 2015 vote, and ignoring that, we can put that as a separate agenda item for next month, but I will strongly recommend that we get accountability that starts with what happened with the 2015 vote.
You know, and I understand your questions in that. This came to WRFCAC prior to your arrival here several years ago, and I think some of the confusion is when the 2015 rate increase was approved, and part of that was a sewer rate increase for the wharf, and part of that was a water rate increase. And obviously the water rates hadn't been raised in 19, 20 years for maybe some good reasons. They had surplus or whatever. But the point is, even when you look at your bills, that came to WRFCAC, and we've had, this comes up all the time. Where is the accounting of that? Well, it's not a separate line item. When you pay your water bill, like your water rate that increased in 2015, over half of that was just inflationary cost to make up for past. So it's a little bit difficult, I think, and this is what is troubling to a lot of citizens, is where's the accountability of that? It all goes to one big pot. And when I looked at it and tried to respond on some social media sites, basically, Bart, what I was looking at is what were those accumulation fund balances in 2015, what are they today, and how much have they grown? And if you look at how much the rate increases were, more than covered for that. So
Okay, I'm not making my point clear. Most people refer and think that both 218 votes have to do with the facility.
yeah, that's incorrect.
And that's incorrect. In 2015, $14 million of the total rate was for improved infrastructure, much of which, if you look at the worksheets, were planned to be done soon thereafter. It also included automated meters. Somewhere along the way, I guess someone decided that we don't need that, which is surprising. That means that literally the day after they asked for 600,000 or what it was for water meters, they decided, well, we really don't need that. We'll use it for something else. So what is the plan to address these other infrastructure issues? There's a lot of visibility on the facility and the planning of the facility, But there's a lot of concern about fixing the pipes for various reasons, environmental among them, as well as design. And, you know, that you're not, that does, what the Sheriff said doesn't address my point of where's the plan to address monies allocated for these water and sewer repairs.
I think I'm going to suggest that we do agendize this because we're really getting beyond what the first quarter is. It is
Okay.
connected to the one water report, so maybe
I was
we
just
need
going to say, there was
have-
an excellent report
Yeah.
at council for people to get up to speed
When we
last week.
agendize it, we can bring
Yeah.
either our consultant in or our public works director, or perhaps both, and
Mhm.
work through what that plan is to do those projects and
Okay.
the funding source. But I think it's beyond what is agendized for this piece, so we should agendize it as a separate discussion
I'm
item.
fine to do it
Yeah,
later.
that-
I just want to point out that it's not being addressed. And to wait for next year ignores the fact that we had a prior 218 vote that had very specific things included in it when people, quote unquote, voted for it. And those issues, other than the plan itself, have been largely ignored, totally, even though money was set aside and collected for doing it. So, but another item is fine with me.
Okay, thank you, Bart. And Jennifer, I'm sure you'll take that, or to council. They may want Public Works to review that, they may want CFAC, they may want WRFCAC, or they may want all the groups, but that's really where it belongs and properly agendized. So thanks for your comments, and thank you, Jennifer, for that. Okay, anything else? John?
Thank you. Jennifer, I need to apologize that I didn't send you any questions. So hopefully this doesn't hit you too cold.
Okay.
In your state budget update section, you talk about how the state is actually going to borrow $6 billion from their surplus money investment fund to pay to CalPERS in order to save money. So I guess there must be some way to send CalPERS a great big fat payment outside of the normal incremental payment process. And that's something I think you were going to research for this question about prepaying the fire station USDA loan. So I found that interesting, and I hope we can get some more information on that next month maybe. I guess there's no question there, but and then on this issue of the state changing the way that they process the sales tax, you said that affected 2 quarters in a row, so this is affecting the prior fiscal year. What are the auditors saying about that?
So that we just heard this. It was coming out on our listserv maybe about a month ago through the Muni Services and HDL are the 2 primary sales tax consultants in the state. And then when we met with them last week, it was more of an impact than they had thought. They thought during the second quarter reporting that they're on a calendar year versus, or their cycle is different than ours. They felt that the second quarter would true up from the first quarter that this was experienced in, and in fact it got worse. They speculate that companies got frustrated with how long it was taking in the new reporting system, so they just kind of dumped everything into the county pools or into one category and gave up. And so they're hoping to do some more training, or they think that they're going to do more training. HDL's been going up to the CDFTA to work with them and figure out how to do it. The auditors have not mentioned any kind of true-up or reconciliation from this. So I don't know that they plan to. We haven't heard anything from them on this at all in terms of accruing back.
So the figures from fiscal 17-18 that's closed will include whatever error the state has made on this reporting?
Correct.
Okay. Let's see. There's a statement in your report about the TOT, and you say when late payments are accounted for, TOT is trending higher than in previous years. Can you comment on the late payments situation?
Yeah, so hotels all generally come in right on time, or within a day or two of the year-end close. Some of our vacation rentals and mobile home parks lag a little bit behind on that. So we issue TOT reports and put them on our website, and Jen Little uses them for her reporting, and it's really heavily focused on the hotels. So we push hard to get those in by the end of the month, so she can have her report by the 5th of the next month and know where she stands. The late ones really do come in from the vacation rentals and some of the mobile home parks. So when we did this report, looked like it was trending lower, yet we knew based on month to month that it was not. So when we looked at the detail, it was the late payments that were coming in from some of those Airbnb and vacation rental properties.
And are there penalties involved when they do that?
We do have penalties. I believe it's 10% for late payments. We work really hard to get the payments in. That's our goal, is we want to get the payments in, but there is penalties that we assess on the late.
I would imagine people in business wouldn't pay 10% more than they need to, but maybe they do. On the section for charges for service, you talked about the cannabis application fee bringing in $90,000, and you talked about the IT service fee bringing in $34,000. But that's really not the whole story. I mean, there's the revenues increased $322,000, so there's another $200,000 roughly there that you haven't really explained. So it might be good if you do a little more research to include in the narrative.
The plan check fees are another piece that are significantly higher, and that is due to the timing of the permits and when those revenues come in. But we can add some language in there.
Okay. Let's see. So you're going to be doing a budget adjustment that's going to the council at the next meeting or soon?
November 29th.
Okay. Is it your plan to do a budget adjustment every quarter?
First quarter and mid-year for sure. Third quarter can get very tricky, because you're right in the middle of budget development during that third quarter. So we did one last year. When we go through and do an analysis of third quarter, if there are budget adjustments that need to be done, we would do a report. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't bring anything forward if there's no need for any adjustments.
Okay. And do you think that's going to be just a normal course of business going forward
That's
every
my
quarter?
plan, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Some questions about the Cloisters Assessment District. There's 3 items in here increasing expenditures in the budget: $1,100 for electricity, $25,000 for water, $1,600 for disposal. Are those things that were just missed in the prior fiscal years, or what is the need for those items to be added at this point?
It's all based on, we did do some staffing budget or staffing allocations during the budget development cycle, but we didn't do any budget for supplies, materials, and that kind of thing for either Cloisters or North Point. We were waiting on the city engineer's report to do those. And in the past, I think they estimated those, and we probably should have done that, and we'll do that in the future. But we held off on doing that until we got the engineer's report, knew what the assessments were coming in, and had a better idea of the needs. So that's why you see both Cloisters and North Point
Okay,
at this point.
so for example, $25,000 for water, is that for actual water they consume, or is that for water-related labor? What is that?
The landscaping, watering of the landscaping.
But they have been charged for that.
Yeah, it's
every
part
year.
of, it comes out of their assessments.
It just didn't get into this year's budget somehow.
Correct.
Okay.
But Jennifer, that was related to the question I asked. There is revenue to cover all these additional things, the
Both-
85,000 or whatever it should be once you adjust it. correct it.
Residents of the Cloisters pay an assessment, and it goes into a separate fund.
Okay.
They actually have 2 funds. They have their kind of operating fund, and then they have an accumulation fund. And then
okay.
North Point is quite small.
Oh, okay.
I think their assessments bring in $4,000 to $5,000 a year. So it's a very small district, but again, they have their own separate fund that
Okay.
we work from.
Fair enough. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Okay, thank you. Dave, go ahead, please.
I wanted to compliment you on the format and the content of the quarterly budget report. I think it really does add clarity and transparency on the budget reporting, and I really like the introduction, the executive summary, and the background information and analysis on each of the different categories there. So I think you did an excellent job there.
Thank you.
It's great. It's a big improvement over what I've seen in the past. One question I have, you mentioned the purchase order system and business license fees. Are all vendors and contractors required under the ordinance, and I should read the ordinance, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. Are they all required to pay business tax if they do business with the city?
Anybody that has a nexus with the city is required to pay a business tax, as long as it's not punitive. So they don't pay based on number of employees. If they are not if they're not located within the city, they pay the base, which is about $147. It's under $150 per year.
So even if their principal place of business is outside of the city of Morro Bay and they have no employees operating inside the city of Morro Bay, they're still paying this license fee?
Correct.
Is that in the ordinance, or is that just a policy? Is that just a city policy?
That's the way the ordinance is written.
It is, okay.
I'm
Right.
used to seeing exceptions for maybe doing business one time in a city or something like that, and it's not, our ordinance is not written that way.
Okay, all right. I guess the only comment I'd have on that is if you're buying a vehicle or you're buying a piece of equipment or something from a dealership that's outside the city, they're paying, the city's paying for that capital purchase and also adding this fee onto the purchase. So I would just assume that gets added into the cost of the purchase.
Wouldn't surprise me in some cases if that happens.
So I don't know, but if that's the way the ordinance is written, then that's what you have to follow, obviously. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Go ahead, Don.
I'll echo Dave's compliments about the format of the report, and I don't have any questions, but I did want to just mention the one water plan for the public. If the public doesn't want to wait until it's agendized here, that was on October 9th at a special city council meeting, and it's my recollection that much of the infrastructure and the capital improvement projects that need to happen around the pipes are already included in the fees, the new rate increase, basically, and that's what was explained at that special council meeting when they went over the one water plan. So I think it's important that it's agendized here, but if the public doesn't want to wait, you can watch that meeting from October 9th and get that information.
Anything else, anybody? I have just, on the property tax, and I see where you say that it's relatively flat estate transactions. Like in terms of projecting, I would assume that you use at least a 2% because that's what they go up. But when you think about the home prices accelerating the last couple years and the sales, it would seem to me that a lot of places are very under, taxed in terms of value versus what's on the property tax rolls. So what percent do you use in your budget when you're trying to project next year's? It would seem to me it should be significantly higher, these tax rolls coming in.
We actually contact the county auditor controller and get estimates from them, and we use their estimates.
Oh, okay. So, and they have a pretty good idea of what sold that last 12 months, so you use that going forward. Okay, that's a good point. I would echo all the other comments too, because of the narrative and that, and it's just enough information, not too much that, people can read it and understand it, and everything, so.
Thank you.
And I would also, I think the city, in terms of not only the financial transparency, but things like the One Water, they're on some of the social media, Facebook and Nextdoor and the city website and the council meetings. Some of those are very well done. So the information is certainly out there, and we want to, do our best to, give you advice on how we think it ought to look so that non-accountants can understand it thoroughly. Bart, did you want to say something?
I apologize. I didn't also. Dave stole the thunder from all of us. Thinking back before you got here, I could never understand why the council wasn't given a summary like this that sort of explained the big things. Mainly they were given spreadsheets, is what I recall, and you had to go through and look at all the numbers. And so if you're a real geek, I guess it was kind of fun to go find what they meant. And both the budget document and now this analysis is so far superior to what was there before. I would assume the council probably is giving you similar feedback, but it is amazing how vastly improved it is. Thank you. To you and staff.
Thank you. We have a great staff, and even though we're all pretty young still here with the city, everybody's very highly motivated. And I'd also add that it speaks to this committee and council's support of adding the budget manager position. This was a challenge to get out with the staff that we have. I can only imagine having one less set of hands and mind and eyes on there. I'm not sure we would have been able to get it out. So adding that position has been very helpful and instrumental in being able to do the CAFR, the budget, audit, and this kind of reporting for the community.
Yeah, your predecessor asked for that, and the council, I think it was a year or two ago, couldn't, get it done for whatever reason. But and the other thing we didn't mention is the Open Gov. When I was looking for those questions on the accumulation fund, just at a high level, hey, maybe I can answer some questions here. It's a very good place to go and get information, so that's helpful as well. So, and at some point, maybe once things we get caught up, maybe we can have a little workshop or something for the public. That would be nice. Thank you. I made a mistake. Somehow, I didn't see on the consent calendar, I thought it said none, but I somehow have two versions here of the agenda. So I didn't ask for approval of the minutes for the, what is it?
I'm going to interrupt you, and there aren't actually minutes attached. We didn't get them done in time for this meeting. So you'll have two sets of minutes for the December to approve the October and November meeting.
Oh, I know. That's why I was trying to figure out how did I miss that. But okay, so that's not, I see it on there. So, okay, so we'll do it next month. Okay, thank you. All right, very good. Thank you. Good discussion. That'll bring us to item B3. Let's see, we did them both. Yeah, okay. Receive first quarter investment report for the period ending September 30th, 2018. Thank you. We've discussed that the last couple meetings. I thought that was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, this brings us current through the first quarter. We have, we're hovering at 89% liquidity. We have a couple other bonds that have, or CDs that have expired in the second quarter. So we are desperately looking to buy CDs at this point, and the rates are going up. So perhaps it's worked in our benefit. They're well above 2%, and in some cases 3%. So we should exceed that LAIF and the OPUS rates quickly. We have transferred more money from the Rabo account into LAIF and OPUS to help earn some more interest, and that was feedback we had received in the previous discussion. So that's reflected in here. Might not still quite be the right ratio, but there are increases to both of those. And again, I have calls out to a couple brokers and looking to see what we can buy at the best rates. So we're monitoring that pretty closely, and that's pretty high on the priority list right now. The committee had asked that the interest earnings be added to the report, and I did forget to do that. So that was provided to you in response to some of the questions. I provided you the amount that's been received and recorded through September 30th, so more interest has been earned but not yet recorded yet in those numbers that I gave you. Total interest is about $33,000, but $9,000 of that is from Coral Ave. So we're looking at about $23,000 $600 in interest that was received from July through September.
So on the Coral Avenue property, I think on last month, we had a $44,000 paid on, right? That was done?
We didn't do anything with that. We had it as a discussion item and waited to have the full payment back. The project was
Okay.
approved at the last council meeting.
Okay.
So we should be receiving payment, and then we can agendize that again for discussion.
Okay, that'll be good, yeah. All right, great. Get that generating some property tax. Okay, questions, comments on the investment report? I think it was pretty self-explanatory, and you're proceeding on the right path in terms of looking for... Go ahead, Dave.
I'd asked the question about, as far as the money market accounts and LAIF, the liquidity and risk differences between the two, if there were any. It didn't seem like there was any difference. Just out of curiosity, you may have mentioned this before, why is the $5 million in Opus Bank, why do we have two different accounts that are essentially the same? We got $5 million in Opus Bank and $10 million in LAIF, and they're both essentially the same type of account. You mentioned that they have, you can withdraw from them the same. What's the advantage of, or the reason for having those two, that money split up like that?
There's a little bit of history that I'm not as familiar with. I know that I think it was when Susan came back as interim, perhaps. All of the money was sitting in LAIF, and she was a little uncomfortable with that, and wanted to open up a second account just to have it split in some way. And I'm not sure exactly how she decided on what that split would be. And Val might know because she was here then. Was it during Susan's time or Craig, perhaps? Oh, okay. Okay, so maybe when Susan was here originally, there was a decision that they didn't want it. They didn't want just one. They wanted two.
Now, is the LAIF account is the state of California?
Well, yeah,
So that's
local-
backed by the, what's the state of California's obligation to pay on that? Obviously, if the state of California went insolvent, maybe they wouldn't, but don't they have an obligation, a legal obligation to provide that money back to the agency?
I believe their insurance is the same. Their insured requirements are the same. I could get more information for you.
Are these actually, these money market accounts, are they actually insured? Like deposit insurance like you'd get with a certificate of deposit?
Yes, there's federal insurance requirements.
There is federal insurance on that, okay. And it obviously would cover that amount.
Correct.
If we had $15 million in LAIF, would it cover the $15 million? Or I just don't, I'm just kind of wondering why we'd split that money up like that.
I think I could
Unless
get
there's
you
a
some
logistical advantage to doing that.
I think I could get you some information on LAIF. Really, $10 million is even too much to have in LAIF right now. And we discussed that in the previous report, that we need to put some of that in CDs. So $10 million in LAIF and even $5 million in Opus. I need to buy a few $1 million worth of CDs at this point. We had wanted to keep cash on hand because we were going to use that for the wharf, and then the planning loan. And I think maybe you missed this conversation because the planning loan that we've been approved for through SRF, the interest rate is 1.71%. So it's much more to our advantage to use that planning loan now and invest our cash to earn more interest. So we kind of switched gears on that a little bit, and we need to invest a significant amount at this point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you can, that would help your interest returns if you
Correct.
could take that money out of there and get it in, because I'm seeing CD rates around 3%,
Yeah,
likely to go higher the way things are going.
correct.
So I would think that would improve your interest rate results if you could do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you have our comments on that, Jennifer. I don't
Okay.
think there's any action required or motion. Thank you. That will bring us to B4, fiscal year, the CAFR report, the schedule. Can you update us on that, please, Jennifer?
Yeah, so I was hoping we could have a conversation about the CAFR and the timeline for that and how the committee wants to proceed with reviewing that. When the auditors were on site, we worked back from a deadline of December 11th to submit a CAFR to the committee for review. and then to be able to provide feedback for our December 18th meeting, which would be the regularly scheduled December meeting. So hopefully that date works. We have everything to the auditors. They were supposed to provide us fund statements by November 13th, and we haven't received those yet, so we've been following up to get a new revised timeline. Our turnaround then was to get them the MD&A and our stats by November 23rd. If we can get the fund statements by tomorrow, we can work on the MD&A. We have the stats section done, but we can work on the MD&A and get that to them Monday when we return from the holidays, and that will keep us back on target. But I wasn't sure of the format for the committee's review, if you wanted to do a subcommittee like you had done in the past to review the CAFR, if we wanted to send that out to everybody for comment and feedback, or what your preference was for that. I mentioned in my opening remarks, and I'll say it again, we're really pushing to meet that December 31st submission without asking for an extension, just so we don't run into budget in mid-year and trying to do multiple things at one time again.
So I'll start off. Last year we had a subcommittee, myself, John Martin, and John Irwin. And then we made some comments, and they didn't all get incorporated because of the timing. But what I see two challenges. Last year we got this information in September and October, and this is December. And that particular week you're talking about, I'm out of the area for an immediate wedding in my family. John Irwin is gone, and we have some members that won't be, joining. So I don't know, how much. I would encourage any of our members that want to review this in detail or whatever to get comments. I don't know if we're going to logistically be able to get a committee together unless Don, Dave, John, and Bart tell me right now, hey, we're ready to go December 12th. John, go ahead. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think there's not time to do a committee. So, but now, will you be here for the December 18th meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, then we can just formulate our individual comments before that, and then as a committee discuss it at the 18th. Would that be timely for you to get submission by the 31st?
Yeah, that was what I was hoping to get, whether it was through a committee or as a subcommittee or as a committee as a whole, to get feedback on the 18th. We can have a discussion about the draft, and then we'll incorporate those changes into the submission, the final submission. Happy to send it out to the whole committee. You guys have been very, responsive and great about submitting questions and that kind of thing ahead. So if we could do that, that would be helpful. And I'll certainly work from the memo that you did from 2 years ago and the feedback, and try to get that incorporated before giving you a draft, so we can at least cover those topics.
Right, that would be good. Just like we're doing today with the budget update and that's what I'm thinking. And then as soon as people get it, they can review it. And maybe John Irwin might want to review it remotely. We'll give him that opportunity if he's, not.
I don't know if it'd be appropriate for me to review it or not. I don't know how it works with stepping down.
What will Dawn's exit, is there a specific date? Because she's obviously on the beyond.
Yeah, so December
here.
11th would be your swearing in to the city council.
Okay.
So you wouldn't be seated on this committee at that point.
But is it worth sending the CAFR
I
don't know between this meeting and December
Yeah.
11th.
We won't have a draft until September
won't have
11th,
it.
so
Okay.
you wouldn't get a copy.
Okay.
So you're going to get to do it on council. No worries. You won't be left out. You'll just be on the later train. Okay. Okay, so I guess when you get it sent, get it out to us electronically, and we'll. Dave, you okay with our plan here? You're okay. Yeah.
Jennifer, will the management letters be sent at the same time, or is that going to be an after?
No, our goal is to give you a full, complete draft of the CAFR.
Okay.
Statistics, MD&A, all of it.
And generally, have things gone smoothly with the audit this year, or were there accrual issues like there were last year, or?
So far, we didn't really have an exit conference, if you will, like we did the prior year. We kind of did that on the phone after they left, and that's when they identified the accrual issues. We haven't really had that. We've gotten them everything they've asked for. We did one adjustment, but I haven't heard of any findings at this point, any new findings. We'll still have the open findings for the PO system because that was implemented after in the policies. But they did see our plan for both of them, and they saw that the PO system was implemented starting in July. So I'm not aware of anything at this point. Cautiously optimistic.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, so that brings us to item C, schedule the next meeting, which is scheduled for December 18th. Let's do a quick quorum check right now, just to make sure we have a quorum for that. I'm a yes. Bart? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, 4. And then maybe Walter, I don't know. And Dawn would be a no. And
do you know when the interviews are for the new CFAC?
They haven't been scheduled yet. We need to get advertising for the positions.
it'll be a while probably, Dawn.
Would it be before the 18th? No. So you'll hold
Well,
meetings?
I got it, right?
I don't think it will be because there's limited council meetings
Yeah.
between now and then. We have the
Okay.
2 in November, but they're pretty full, and then the December 11th is the swearing in. So I
Okay.
doubt they're scheduled for that day.
So you're looking at all the commissions and boards and the termination dates, okay. And then you have to post an advertisement and all that, a couple
Yeah,
weeks?
we would do one just for CFAC if there
Oh,
aren't any
okay.
others. I think Harbor maybe is still recruiting. There's might be a couple other
Okay.
advisory boards still looking, but if there aren't any, we would just recruit for CFAC.
So if folks are interested, though, they wouldn't necessarily need to be ready for a December meeting.
Correct.
Yes, I've been recruiting, so I don't know. But you all are welcome to recruit anybody.
It's a fun committee.
Yeah. Okay, so anything else on that?
I don't have on here future agenda items, but just to recap, the December meeting will be heavy on year-end Measure Q reporting, CAFR, and we can agendize the 218 discussion. I'm not sure if we'll have time to get to it, but we can agendize it, so if there is time, at least it's there. And the budget brochure are the 4 things I think I have outstanding.
So I would say in terms of priorities, I think the first priority is actually the year-end Measure Q, because we are required to do that, and that's the only thing that's in our charter that we are required to do. So that has to be number 1 priority. CAFR would be number 2, and then anything else in that order. But
Okay.
anything else, guys?
Yes, I made a comment at a council meeting, basically pointing out that there is a document that the city has prepared called relating to a budget gap. One technical issue there, I think CalPERS costs got added into that, and I don't think technically it's the same kind of, it's an apples and oranges. CalPERS, I believe, is an obligation, whereas the other items in this category of budget gap are things that would be nice if we could do, like capital improvements. Anyway, when I pointed out that there was such a document that was disavowed at one point, the council criticized me, saying, well, you're on the finance committee and you need to get engaged and to be involved, relative to if I had concerns about the budget gap, which wasn't really my point necessarily, although I was concerned about a budget gap. But my understanding is that our involvement in discussions of a budget gap and issues around that were specifically pointed at the finance group that Jennifer has. And other aspects of the city budget gap were not part of the purview of this committee. That was my understanding when that subject came up before. So I was taken aback that I was criticized for not being engaged or getting involved in this committee relative to discussing possible ways to address the budget gap. So what is the issue? Is that part of something we should be looking at, is to get involved in addressing the budget gap? Or is it, because again, that's not what my understanding was. Which one of us didn't get this right? Could be me.
So all I can say is, based on history, Jennifer, a little bit before you, I've we have always gotten together with city council and drafted a work plan. And that was to try to discuss ahead of time what we would look at, because anything related to finance could be, addressed by this committee or any committee, which would be more than a workload that I have felt for, at least in the past, we didn't have the manpower to do, or the qualified people. Remember, we were going from 5 to 7. So, and there was some duplication of effort, in my opinion, on WRF-CAC and PWAB, some of the things they look at. So that's kind of where some of that is coming from, where maybe some things that we didn't look at, or if it came to me to get agendized, I specifically said, no, that's out of our purview, and until, let's do what we're asked to do and get 100% of that done before we start going off on other tangents. Then I also spoke at public comment, probably about 6-8 months ago, to City Council, saying that if you are now still having difficulty with some of the finance aspects of the WRF, that maybe our committee could take that on, because now I felt we were more transitioned, we had more people, we didn't have new people, and more people taking an interest in it, so I made that suggestion. As far as a budget gap, I think sometimes, I don't know if it's semantics or what, I don't think there's a budget gap. There's a gap between the wish list, but we have a balanced budget, and we get frequent reporting on that, and we advise on that. So I'm not sure what your comment is or what it relates to.
I was criticized pretty soundly by the council for not here getting involved and engaged in addressing the budget gap. Now, the budget gap is the term that the city has applied to this. I mean, you can look at the documents. They're published documents that top says budget gap. I'm not arguing that there isn't a balanced budget, and if you want to come up with another term, that's fine. I didn't come up with that term. The city did. In fact, I think it was Buckingham or his realm that came up with that initially. But it was just, like I said, I was admonished, and I didn't understand why, because this committee basically, I think by definition, has said that our scope is limited to the things we're talking about here, and or if it's budget issues, specifically Jennifer's department. I remember that discussion rather specifically. That was like 2 or 3 years ago. So what I'm hearing is, my understanding was correct, that we are not here to try to look at how we come up with grand plans to fund these things that would be nice to have.
I think we can address that the next time when we meet, the council meets with all the citizen boards in terms of what they want us to do. And because it is a give and take. They have listened to our input. They've asked us to take on some, like the CAFR was something that we assumed and took on, so I'm okay with that. But I can't answer why you got the response you did, Bart. I don't know. So I think that's, so we got the CAFR, the year-end detail on the Measure Q number 1, CAFR number 2, and then if we can to the budget brief and the issues that Bart was bringing up on that. Okay. Anything else, guys? All right, so it looks like we'll have a quorum. We will adjourn today's meeting at 4:50 p.m. And thank you all